Coach Ranjan.
Hello, brother. Laban Ditchburn.
Namaste.
Namaste. This is so fantastic to have you with me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation and loving your presence here.
Well, mate, thank you very much for inviting me on. What am I, nuts? What am I not going to come on and kick around with my man Ranjan on the other side of the continent?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laban. And before I take you into this conversation, I would like to introduce you to my Indian audience with your own introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I have my brother, my friend, Laban Ditchburn, a child badly affected by divorce and dysfunction. Laban sought validation and escapism in all the wrong places. But through self-discovery, not being afraid to ask for help, and a ton of hard work, he conquered the full gamut of addictions. By understanding and then reverse engineering the root cause of why he needed to escape, giving up his addictions was almost effortless. These days, he gets his high from ultramarathon running and searching the planet for the world's best steak. Today, he defines the word transformation, reshaping his body by swapping 60 pounds of body fat with 30 pounds of muscle and bone. He discovered a simple cure for his incurable autoimmune disease in the process. Now, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally in charge of his own destiny, Laban's journey continues to inspire those ready to change their lives. An exemplar and a revolutionary, he revels in unabashedly sharing what he has learned, how to conquer the demons you don't know you have, and how to be unstoppable in getting to where you want to be. His debut and internationally acclaimed book, Bet on You, is a can't put down must read with its raw, real, hilarious, and inspiring message of hope. Now I'm giving you the world's best courage coach, Laban, who shares his life in Mexico with his great wife, the bravest person he knows, and the future mother of their children, Anna. Welcome to my show. Welcome, brother, Laban Ditchburn.
Thank you so much for having me, Ranjan. I've been looking forward to this for a little while now. And I got to say, you're doing God's work. If you haven't subscribed or rated this podcast yet, once this episode's finished, get on there and help share this amazing message, because Coach Ranjan has been interviewing. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with some of the previous people we had on the show. So you're doing God's work.
Thank you so much, Laban. Laban, you had a great journey of personal reinvention. Tell me, what's your definition of courage that you are living these days now?
The definition of the courage that I'm living these days. So the word courage for me, and I know everyone has their own truth, right? But my truth for the word courage is really, if you look at the negative side of courage, it's fear. So what is courage? It's like alleviating fear from people's lives. So in terms of my own experience, courage for me really is leaning into an unlimited realm of possibility. I'm on a constant trajectory of growth. And in order for me to achieve the outlandish goals that I set for myself, Ranjan, I need to be operating with unlimited courage. So for me, alleviating fear and flipping that on its head, and the positive affirmational comment is courage, world's best courage coach. And how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? Well, when you go around calling yourself that, you've really got a level to ascend to. Otherwise, you're out of alignment.
Laban, how do you differentiate between courage and confidence? You know, in the last 10 to 20 years, people have been talking about confidence and faking confidence. You know, fake it till you make it. Then how do you differentiate between coming from courage and faking confidence?
So I think the fake it till you make it phenomena is a really interesting conversation. And I think there's a lot to be said about human biology and physiology that happens when you when you say are frowning and you force yourself to smile, there's something chemically that changes in your body and it forces you to be in a much more enlightened, a much happier state. So I think faking it until you make it, you got to be really clever about what you're in alignment with, right? Because going around and pretending that life is okay, right, when it's not, is totally out of alignment. But going around knowing that life will be okay and having an arsenal of tools and knowledge and support around you that will allow you to figure that out and figure that journey out and to suffer through adversity, to suffer through challenges in life, because adversity is our best teacher, right? We need to go through and experience those so that we can really appreciate the highs. So for me, hopefully that articulates your question well. For me, that's really important.
Laban, when exactly did you realize, or you started being the world's best courage coach?
So the world's best courage coach, and when people hear this, Ranjan, they might be a little bit triggered and they might be thinking, oh, that's very boastful. That's very egotistical. And I'm glad that you're experiencing that. And I'll make this declaration. It is nothing to do at all with ego. In fact, it stemmed from an experience that I had with a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Steve Hardison. Now, for those in the audience that haven't come across Steve Hardison, I'm sure Ranjan will put the link, if you haven't already, to the Deuce Latui video and the link to his book. He's known as the ultimate coach. And I watched a YouTube video of him that was really the only footage of him that existed about 12 years ago. And I was so moved by what took place in that video. Like it adjusted my genetic makeup. It was that impactful that I was like, I need to be in the presence of this man to see if what he's like on the video, he's like in real time. And I got his phone number and I called him up and he picked up the phone. He said, hey, Steve speaking. I said, Steve Hardison? He goes, yes, it is. I said, Steve Hardison, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia, where I was living at the time. He goes, Laban, so great to hear from you. I've been waiting for this call all my life. Now, the thing about Steve Hardison, as I'm sure you've shared, up until recently, he was an enigma. Like he didn't exist anywhere. He has been offered to go on the Oprah Winfrey show a number of times. And yeah, he just didn't want any part of that. No podcast. I knew he was financially very successful. I knew he had a great life, but I just said to him, Steve, I just witnessed this video and I just wanted to experience you in real life to see if what I saw in that video was real. And I just wanted to ask you one very specific question. He said, what's that, Laban? I said, what do you need help with, Steve? I had nothing else. I had nothing else to offer this man. And that's something you can use. You can use that for someone that you think has it all. Ask them what they need help with. So he said, you know what, Laban, I'm 8% body fat. I do 10 miles a day. I got the woman of my dreams. I got everything a man could ever want. But I really want to acknowledge you and thank you for asking me that question. I said, oh, no worries, Steve. You're welcome. I said, are you still not going on podcast interviews and, that type of thing? He said, that's right, Laban. I said, no worries, no worries. I said, the reason I ask is I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and well on my way to being known as the world's most positively influential speaker. But someone that I respect and admire recently said, Laban, there's too much ego associated with that statement. And Steve said to me, who's a devout Mormon, he goes, Laban, you tell that person to F off. He used the whole word. He goes, do you know who I am? And I go, who are you, Steve? He goes, I'm the best coach in the world. And when he said that, Ranjan, it came from a place of absolute zero ego. And that moment transformed my life, and some further conversations that we had with some other people, we came up with the world's best courage coach. The world's best courage coach is a declaration that I make to myself every single day. Like I said, how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? And from operating from that mindset, Ranjan, it allows me to put myself in uncomfortable positions. Because if I was to declare myself the 31st best courage coach, I could wimp out on a few things. But I'm like, oh man, how the world's best courage coach conduct himself? And then I'll do that brave thing. And that momentum really helps with the confidence that you mentioned as well. When you start getting a positive feedback loop, because you're in alignment, your self-confidence goes through the roof. And I would argue that my self-confidence is amongst the best of anyone that I know. And again, I'm not saying that to gloat or to brag, but it allows me to have the confidence to have conversations with the most successful people on the planet and feel like not only am I adding value to their life, that like they're enjoying having me in their life.
Laban, it took me years to accept the value that I'm adding. It took me years to understand who I am. It took me years to accept myself. And, it was from you. I owe this to you. It was from you. After I heard you, after we started exchanging our messages, that I thought exactly, this is who I am. This is who I need to be. And I started declaring that I'm a world expert on authentic influence, and this is who I need to be, and this is who I can be. I've been being that, but there is a gap between knowing it and being it, and and somewhere in the middle, the doing self starts dominating, or the doing self starts interfering. It's like something that we need to do every day. But it took a couple of days for me to come to grips and understand that. But what would you tell somebody who comes to know about this for the first time in life? A being-centered approach. For them, the doing self dominates every aspect of their life. So how would you put it in very simple about a being-centered approach of being the world's best?
Well, the majority of your audience is in India. Is that right?
Exactly.
So ordinarily I would talk about Michael Jordan levels of genius in every one of us, right? But I'm going to switch it over because I'm a massive cricket fan. In fact, I just retired from playing 35 years of cricket at Melbourne University.
Fantastic.
And so I would say that every single one of you has Virat Kohli levels of genius, or Sachin Tendulkar, right? Depending on who you prefer. I know Kohli's, he's fallen off the wagon a little bit. I think he needs to eat some more dairy, but like every one of us has these levels of genius within us, right? And if you are attracted to this podcast with Ranjan, it's because you are seeking more. There's a fulfillment component that's not quite there in your life, and you're in the right place. So once you realize, and that takes work, right? You've got to do the work. You've got to do the work to figure out what that is. Then the whole world around you is going to transform. You'll never work another day in your life. There's a lot of poverty in the subcontinent. I mean, there's poverty all around the world, but there's a lot of, the wage gap, the slums and the super wealthy. It's a big divide, right? And you see it in the streets. I've been to India, flew into Mumbai, and went to Goa for a wedding a few years ago, and I had a wonderful time in India. And all of my Indian friends are amazing human beings. But when you realize what your Virat Kohli level genius is, you'll never work again, and you'll get paid a lot of money for it because you do it way more than you would a normal job. Now the money component is a byproduct of the value that you're creating, right? That's why Sachin Tendulkar will never have to worry about money ever again. That's why Virat Kohli, because they've made that declaration that they are going to be legacy cricketers. All right. And if you're not a cricket fan, I'm really sorry about the analogies.
No, I am. And Sachin Tendulkar is the person I make a mention of very shortly in all my trainings and talks. I love the way he plays. I love the way what he does when he doesn't play. I love the way he carries himself. And that's the embodied understanding. That's the embodied understanding of who he is and where he comes from. And Laban, going back into your history, into your past, you had so many things that you had to deal before you had to handle before you came. And it's the same thing with me as well. I've done petty jobs. I have wandered across my life, and I was confused guy, and I've gone through a bad divorce. I've been a single parent for 6 years, and I have had my own, those rock bottom moments. But the question I still have is that, does everyone need to hit that rock bottom before they reinvent themselves? Or is there a way that somebody can start experiencing this difference without hitting that rock bottom?
It's a wonderful question. I don't know that I've got the answer for it, but I'll answer from my own perspective. And I think that when you hit that rock bottom hard enough, that's when you have the motivation to do something about it. If you have the mental discipline to catch yourself before you really hit rock bottom, and it's really important, Ranjan, I didn't end up in the gutter. I wasn't in the slums. Like I wasn't a degenerate, drunk drug user lying on the streets, like not for very long, at least. I had a couple of moments in my life, but I had the wherewithal, the self-awareness to catch myself. For me, that was my rock bottom. Some people go way worse than that. Some people catch it even sooner. So I think it's wherever you are in your journey and what your tolerance for pain is. I had and still have a really high tolerance for pain. I've just transitioned that tolerance for pain into ultra endurance running, which allows me to run 100 kilometers nonstop. Like that's painful, but the outcome is totally different, and it doesn't give you the hangover like the drugs and alcohol do.
Levin, about 2 years ago, I believe I read this book, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. I don't know if you have come across Michael Singer. And post that, I've been a big fan of Michael Neal, and then The Ultimate Coach changed my life, the same way we all are influenced. Now, since I read this Michael Singer's The Surrender Experiment, I have started, that was my first encounter with a surrendered life, with a being-centered, from a being-centered life. Now, how do you balance between, living from a being-centered approach and pushing yourself to create the kind of life that you want to live?
I think understanding that we are flawed, perfectly imperfect, divine beings, and that we will continue to make mistakes, but being okay with that and realizing that that's part of their learning experience. You would have heard people talk about this before. Like you have to learn how to fail, and it's not fail in a negative sense. Like all the failures, and I'm using inverted commas here, are the catalyst for my growth. So I think being okay with not being perfect. I wrote in my book, Ranjan, towards the end in the last chapter, the more I learn about life, the more I realize I know stuff all about it, right? I know, but I do know a lot about a lot of things because I'm an inquisitive individual, and I've read a lot and I've studied a lot. But there's also a whole nother world that there's no way I could ever get anywhere near it. And I think having those levels of humility make you very relatable to people. I think anyone that goes around purporting to know and to have all the answers, it just comes across as disingenuous. It's out of alignment. It's a lot of ego. And for me, that's been a real journey of discovery, being okay with saying, hey, I don't have the answers, but here's my experience, and it might be valuable to you. And I think that's why, as coaches, that's the best thing we can do. We can ask lots of open questions and allow people to share, and then you can tie it in with something that's aligned with your own life experience and say, well, hey, look, I know you're struggling with this. This is what I did. This might be of value to you. And that's the miracle of coaching, in my opinion.
Levin, as part of this journey, I would like to tell you that, I went through a long journey of self-discovery before landing onto this being-centered approach. And it went through, courses and workshops and trainings and alternative therapies and many things to learn from the public speaking and many things, and certifications and many things. I'm curious to know, your journey of self-discovery. What all actually it consisted of.
One of the real big aha moments for me, Ranjan, was when I got access to a gambling psychologist. And for those that know any of my story, gambling, drugs, drink, negative self-talk, limiting beliefs, incurable autoimmune disease were all part of my life. And the very first session I had with this gambling counselor, she spoke about the link between coping mechanisms that children develop as the result of growing up in a less than nurturing environment. Now, that is a fancy word for trauma. Now, wherever you are listening to this in the world, more than likely, you experienced one or many counts of traumatic experiences, right? Whether they were intentional or not. And they can have very profound impacts on our brain and our learning and our ability to be okay with living. And I think for me, that was one of the main areas, because when I started to understand that the reason I was because of what had happened, that I could start to reverse engineer that. And I use that term in my bio as well. When you start to understand how things work, in my opinion, then you can fix them. And for me, that's what I did. I just started to reverse engineer as much as I could to try and understand. And then when I learned about the power of forgiveness with my mum and dad, who also grew up in really dysfunctional homes, and this legacy of trauma. But I think when you understand that these experiences are our new superpower, Ranjan, like these are our most powerful tools in which we can serve and help other people, then it holds no dominion over us anymore. That's the beauty of it. So no matter what you've gone through, right, no matter what you've endured, you can impact the lives of millions and millions of people by having the confidence and the courage to share your story without operating from a place of victimhood.
Laban, what's been your experience since you made this declaration of being the world's best courage coach? How's that experience with the world and what you have been creating since you have declared that?
One day, Ranjan, I'm going to write a list. It's going to be a long list, but I'm going to tell you what I've got in front of mine right now. It gave me the clarity when someone asked me what I did. And for anyone that's in this industry, like used to be, hey, Laban, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a coach and I'm a speaker and I'm a podcast host and I'm an author. I'm an editor and I've got all these things. Now, when people ask me what I do, it's my favorite question right now, because it's like, I'm the world's best courage coach. And they go 99 times out of 100, they go, wow, what does that look like? I teach people how to take bold, massive, and strategically courageous action to facilitate miraculous outcomes. That clarity, when I communicate, is what people need to be okay with sharing their stories with me. Most people comprehend life at a second grade level unless they're experts or passionate about it scientifically, right? That's 8 years of age. Most people comprehend life at an 8-year-old level, all right? You ask me about Native American history, that's where I would be, right? You ask me about the history of Delhi. You're like, it's just not anything I know anything about, right? Second grade level. And when you understand that and you give people the clarity that they crave, people respond way better. People at the top of their game love being around someone who makes that very brazen, bold declaration of being the world's best courage coach. I've been invited to speak with people like Les Brown and Tom Ziegler. I've actually co-created an event which is going to be happening in Panama City Beach in Florida in America in September 17th and 18th. It's called the Upgrade Your Life Tour. So I'm sharing a stage with Les Brown, one of the greatest motivational speakers in history. I've got a mastermind group that we co-created with my business partner and very good friend, Evans Putman, called World's Best. And we've got 3 Hall of Fame speakers in there, including Les Brown. We've got like 4 New York Times best-selling authors, a number of other people that have got Wall Street Journal, people that are the top of their game, that want to be around and have also made a declaration that they are the world's best in their chosen niche, right? Or niche, depending on how you guys pronounce it. So for me, it's improved my financial status, my ability to charge more with coaching because people see more value in it, my ability to get through to people at the top end of town. I'm able to have conversations with the most extraordinary people on the planet. And that's a few of countless other examples. stuff that's not even realized. And this was only September 2021 that this came about, Ranjan. So, and for anyone that's curious to know, right, if I could share this with people, there's a few parameters that might help you come up with your own world's best statement. And there can be more than one world's best courage coach, right? There is room, but the way that the universe distributes our responsibilities and our gifts, it's very unique, I think. So you've got to find something that is non-quantifiable and intangible. So if you were to say to me, Ranjan, I'm the world's best right-hand batsman. Well, we know that's not true, right? Because that's Virat Kohli, right? But if you were to say to me, well, for example, the declaration that you made, what's yours again?
World's best authentic influence coach.
Okay, so world's best authentic influence coach. And I'd love for you to start updating that in your Zoom name as well, Ranjan. I think that'd be really great. So that is something, unless there is a world's best authentic influence competition held at a Mumbai convention center every year, all right, no one's going to take that away from you. So it's non-quantifiable, it's intangible, right? And you think about what's the challenges or the problems that you solve in the world with what you do. For me, for example, it's alleviating fear from people's lives. What's the positive, opposite, affirmational part of that? It's courage, right? World's best courage coach. We've got this mastermind, we've got names like world's best leverage coach, world's best self-care coach, world's best podcast prosperity coach. I should have them all written down, but it's the most magnificent thing ever because everyone turns up with a service mindset. How can I serve this audience? And the ego's checked at the door. It's the most powerful creation that you can imagine. So for your listeners, Ranjan, I would really encourage people to start thinking about what they are the best in the world at, right? What are you really good at that other people find really challenging? Write that down. What am I world class at that other people find really challenging? It could be knitting, juggling, drawing, speaking, whatever, right? Second thing is, what do people ask me for advice for all the time, right? What do people ask me for advice for? And then the third thing is, what is it when I do it that I walk away from doing it and I feel like king of the mountain, where you feel you're levitating with joy? And it's usually when you're operating from a place of service. And if you can answer those three things, that'll really help you come to the conclusion of what your world's best statement would be. And I'd love to hear from you. Reach out, connect with me and Ranjan. Let me know. Let us know what your world's best statement is, because it's powerful.
It took me, I started my journey of personal transformation in 1997. And probably by 1998, I had done many of those things which people aren't even aware of now. But then I wasn't very sure about what I'm really good at, and I was very confused, and I was into everything, as a dabbler. But then when I heard you, when I spoke with you, and probably when we were exchanging these messages, I started asking myself, like, what am I the world's best at? And you won't believe it took me just a couple of days, and I was there. I got it. I look back, I dug into my past, and I thought, what am I really good at? And what do people really compliment about me? What do people tell me after they have experienced, being with me in my trainings and workshops and sessions? And they say, how can you be so clear? How can you be so transparent? How can you be so honest and authentic? And that's where I got it. This is what people repeatedly talk about me. And I said, this is what I can be. And probably this is what people get an example of, when they look at me and when they experience those moments with me. And since I've declared that I'm the world's best authentic influence coach, you won't believe this as really. And what do I do? I help people increase their impact without being manipulative, without being persuasive, and without being strategic, which most other workshops talk about. So I still remember when the day I came across you and, as the world's best courage coach. And that reminded me of my own journey and what have I done my whole life. It was full of courage. Even this afternoon, I was just thinking, like, there is a lot that I'm going to talk to you about, and especially when it comes about courage. I'll tell you, it was probably I think 2003, I had written my first book, and it was in a language that I didn't know. I learned the language, and then I wrote the book in this language. It's an Indian language, my native language, Telugu. And then with this manuscript in my hands, with no money to have it published, I started going door to publisher, and requesting them to publish. Well, of course, nobody published, but then I said, I'm going to do this. And I made a commitment that I want to have this book published in less than 12 months. And I made it in less than 8 months, I believe, if I remember. And if I look back, yes, I mean, there are many who don't realize, many who don't acknowledge what they've done, who don't appreciate what they've actually accomplished in their lives. Now, tell me about your journey of Bet on You. What inspired this idea of Bet on You? How did you create it? And the most magical thing, how did you create Les Brown?
So, so this is reason number 759 to create your own podcast, right? So, because my speaker coach podcasting journey started in March 2020, right? We were living in Australia. We were in Melbourne, Australia, which endured the longest lockdowns of any city in the world at that point. And I had my first paid speaking engagements all lined up, and they were all cancelled. And I was like, man, I need a way to get my message out. So I created the podcast. 10 episodes in, with less than 10 subscribers, I reached out to Les Brown, the world's greatest transformational speaker on the planet, right? And he picked up the phone and he said, hi, Les speaking. And I said, Les Brown. He said, yes, it is. I said, Les Brown, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia. He said, well, hi, Laban, how can I help you, boy? I said, Les, I've got an amazing podcast series called Become Your Own Superhero. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'll be honored if you came on and shared your amazing story with our audience. He said, well, what are you thinking, boy? And I said, to be honest, Les, whenever suits you, probably works pretty well. He came on 3 days later, Ranjan. Before we even started recording this, I asked him, I said, what do you think of the name of the show, Become Your Own Superhero? And he answered in the most unbelievable way that you could imagine. And I was so endeared to Les Brown and the way that he responded that I just verbally diarrheaed my story of transformation to him. And he listened with all this patience of a saint. And he let me finish. He said, congratulations, Laban. I said, thanks, Les. He said, Laban, do you have a book? Now, this is really important. I never finished high school. I never went to college. I don't have a single qualification in anything. I said, no, Les, I don't have a book. He said, you need a book for credibility if you're going to be a speaker. And then he said, who was the most influential person in your life when you were 5 years of age? And I thought about it for a minute, Ranjan. I was like, man, despite my mother's many, many flaws that have been my darling mother. And he goes, well, what attributes did she give you? And I was like, oh, man, she was unconditional loving and tenacious and spiritual. And he's writing all this down. He looks up at me, Ranjan, and he says, Laban, this is a God moment. I'm going to show you how to monetize your passion. For the next 10 minutes, he reads back to me the blueprint for this book he wants me to write called Bet on You. He said, Laban, you're going to write the book. You're going to turn the book into a keynote. You're going to turn that keynote into a 3-day retreat. And even if you muck this up, you're going to make $200,000 in the next 12 months. And then he said, Ranjan, he said, and I'm going to write the foreword for your book. And I interview you on my social media platform with 4 million followers. This was in mid-May 2020. I said to him, Les, if you're going to write the foreword to my book, I'll have it to you by June 30, 2020. And in 6 weeks, never having written any book before, I wrote 30,000 words of the first draft of Bet on You. And it was published late last year. We did a big live virtual event. Les helped me promote it and transform my life in the process.
I'm just speechless.
That is a 100% true story, by the way.
This isn't something that you can just ignore. I mean, this is so powerful. This is so magical. Laban, how do you do that? I mean, I'm not talking about you right now. I'm talking about Les Brown. Reaching a point where you become such a powerful giver. You create others, you create life, you create experiences, you create this magic. In a way, when I asked you, Laban, how did you create Les Brown? Probably I should say, I should also say, ask Les Brown, how did you create the author Laban? It's a mutual thing. And what do you have to say about this, Laban?
Let me share another happening in my life last year to demonstrate my response to that question. So everyone's heard of Chicken Soup for the Soul, the books. Well, not everyone, a lot of people have. That one of the co-authors, Jack Canfield, came on my podcast. He was introduced to me through a friend of a friend. And at this point, Mark Victor Hansen, who's the other co-author, had endorsed my book. He was also a guest on the podcast. So Jack Canfield comes on. Jack's been on about a 200 plus podcast tour. He's very fatigued from interviewing so much. And he's pretty cold and distant on a video. And I could see him being very distant, Ranjan, and I thought, ooh, I've got to do something here. And I said, hey, Jack. He goes, yeah. I said, I got a commitment for you. He said, what's that, Laban? I said, you're going to leave this podcast with more energy than when you started. And his whole body language shifted, Ranjan. He just said, okay, Laban, I'm going to hold you to that. The first question I asked him, Ranjan, was this. Said, Jack, my wife and I have experienced the loss of 16 consecutive miscarriages. What advice would you give us to help bring this baby into the world, right? Now, he'd never been asked that question before, and he answered it so beautifully, right? The second question I asked him was, Jack, what do you need help with? Now, this is the number one success coach in the world. He earns $5,000 an hour. Now, can you convert that into rupees for me? How many lakhs? I don't know how many lakhs that is. Right? It's a lot. It's probably a year's, probably a half a year's wages for a lot of people, right? Per hour. Number one success coach. Said, Jack, what do you need help with? He goes, Laban, I don't need any help with anything. Very, very arrogant in his response. And then he thought about it for a minute. And he was like, actually, I've been trying to lose 15 pounds of body fat around my waist. And I said, Jack? He said, yeah. I said, today's your lucky day. He goes, why is that, Laban? I said, because what I didn't tell you about my magnificent transformation is that I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on 30 pounds of muscle. And if that's something you want to have a conversation with at the end of the interview, we'll do that. At the end of the podcast, Ranjan, I had the number one success coach in the world asking me for my advice on this challenge that he's going through. And the reason that I wanted to share the story with you is this. Just because someone is the number one success coach on the planet doesn't mean they've got everything sorted. In fact, the more I kick around with these kind of people, the more I hang around with them, the more I realize that they need as much, if not more help than what everyone else does. And when you understand as an individual the power of your own life experience and the knowledge you've acquired, overcoming adversity after adversity after adversity, the only difference between me believing I can help Jack Canfield and you not believing is simply that, belief. And when you start believing that you can impact the world at that kind of level, the world around you will transform.
Very right, Laban. Probably that's what we call as imposter syndrome. And, we have millions struggling. It takes time for them to believe and acknowledge what they are really capable of doing. And yes, we all of us had a time with imposter syndrome. But when now these days in the last 2-3 years, when I talk to people, there were years when I was struggling to establish myself as a speaker and a trainer and a coach. But then in the last 2 years, since that moment of the surrender experiment or my conversations with Michael Neal and understanding of this approach, life has been different. My approach has been different. My conversations have been different, and I see the difference in the experience of people, and I see them, the facade that they carry around themselves. And when you look through that, you see that there are areas of improvement which they're hiding. But when you are authentic with them, when you make space, they start coming down. They start exploring. They start expressing their willingness to explore and share, and what they actually want to expose, what they want to really learn from you. I truly agree with you, Laban. The moment we talk about coaching, the moment we talk about courage, although it's very intangible, then world expects tangible results. The world asks for tangible results, and there is a lot of conversation going on wherever I go these days, in conferences and talks, and people talk about measurability. People talk about metrics. So how do you measure that? How do you how do you see the impact? How do you calculate the impact? That's one side. But then I'm asking, my question is that, my understanding is that a being-centered approach I see is the most spiritual, the most authentic way of living. And how do you find this balance of understanding between the spiritual and the material side of life, the experience and the money side of life? So when you talk about converting experience into money, converting knowledge into money, converting your skill into money, converting your confidence, courage into money, how would you want to talk about that?
So this is a really fascinating subject, Ranjan, because after my background, for people that are curious, I worked in technology recruitment. That's how my relationships with the Indian community have been growing, through recruiting a lot of SAP people. So we used to deal with a lot of offshore teams that were based in Bangalore particularly. And
sorry interrupting, Laban, by the way, I work in technology, and I'm the chief learning officer of an HCM technology company. So
there you go. so I'm very, very familiar with your work. I didn't know that about you, Ranjan. It shows I need to learn more about you. But my foray into entrepreneurship started in 2019, and I went out on my own, created my own business, and it was a total unmitigated financial disaster, right? And I use that term for effect only because it ended up being a huge blessing in disguise, right? The universe was guiding me gently another way. Didn't want me to do that. And I did it for 13 years, Ranjan. And when I look back, I didn't like it at all. I was okay at it because I was quite headstrong, but it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. Now that I've figured out what I'm supposed to be doing, I have an unbelievably safe, maybe safe's not the right, I have an undeniable knowledge that I will be successful in all areas of my life, including financial. And I've put my faith in my passion for the financial rewards to come as a result of the value that I'm providing to the world. And it's only really in the last 6 months that I started earning an income. We were in lockdown in Australia, as I said. We had no ability to go out and work. Like we suffered. I mentioned the miscarriages that Anna and I, my wife and I, have had. We've gone through major adversity, but because I've got this very clear vision of being known as the world's most positively influential speaker, I know that if I'm fulfilling that role, I'll never have to worry about money again. And then when the world's best mastermind came around, like to join that as a multiple five-figure or single-figure five-figure investment in US dollars, there's revenue streams coming that are coming. And let me share something as well that's really powerful, right? We talk about Les Brown coming on my podcast and giving me all that value. Les Brown has gone through prostate cancer twice. He's had stage 4 cancer twice, right? Yes. He's got a record now for being in remission. But I said to him at the end of that interview, Les, what do you need help with? Since that time, I've been able to introduce him to a number of world-leading medical experts that have been able to give him some knowledge and some ideas about how he can further improve his life. And just a few months ago, I asked Les again, what do you need help with, right? He said, I'm always looking for ways to improve the reach with this message for the speaker training that he offers. Now, because of me asking that question, I've been able to introduce him to people that are doing $7 US figures, that's millions, right, in one day because of this particular structured approch, right? Now, Les Brown, as a result of this, Ranjan, is probably going to make about 8 to 10 million US dollars, right? Now, I didn't know that it was going to be so impactful, but imagine if someone shared something with you that allowed you to make that kind of money. And I know that these kind of numbers are probably blowing people's minds here, right? And it's good, it should be, but because we want to normalize these numbers for you, right? But if you understand, like if someone was going to share something with you that's going to, bring 8 million, $10 million into your life, what are you going to want to do for that person, right? You're going to want to help them out as much as you can. And so there's this, my point is, right? And the reason I wanted to share this with you is that if you move in the direction that you are supposed to be going, eventually you won't need to worry about money. And when I'm coaching people, I don't deal with people that require tangible results that are going to get a 10% improvement on their courage. You can't quantify that stuff in my
Exactly.
opinion, right?
Yes.
Right. And the reoccurring theme, and the people that you coach, I'm sure you see this all the time, is we help them see possibility by removing the blocks that are keeping them playing small. They're keeping them from not feeling confident enough to have conversations with, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, who've sold 600 million books, the number one nonfiction booksellers on the planet, just about, right? Put me in a room with any person on the planet and I would no longer feel overwhelmed or intimidated. Not a single one. And you can do the same thing. It's just up here. The money will come. Keep providing value. Keep asking people what they need help with. How can I add value to this person's life? And do it without any expectation of anything in return.
Exactly. I shared this as the last thing on my last slide when I was giving a session on authentic influence to students of a university here. And I asked them, like, if there's one thing you would ask me, which can help you impact people through any work that you're doing, I said, ask them, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? And how can I serve you? Probably that's one question. If you keep asking everybody, that will put you in a position where you will be able to share value, you'll be able to create value, and that value comes back in the form of money or any tangible thing that you are actually expecting. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say amen. Amen.
Okay, amen. Now, Laban, there's one other side, in spite of knowing this, in spite of understanding a being-centered approach, well, there are times, well, I don't say it's necessary, but then I say you come across people where I don't do that, but all of a sudden we feel like we try to make them understand, we try to make them see what we see, we try to make them understand what is this being centered approach. And then people come back with this one question: is this going to get me the success that I'm looking for? And what's the proof, or what's the evidence, or is it proven? Now, these are questions, and people are looking for solid evidences before they take this path, because I call my long-term coaching as a jungle walk. It's jungle. You need to be prepared to go through a jungle, and that's when you experience what you experience in a forest. Anything that you need evidence for, I call it like a pool dive. You know the boundaries, but when you don't know that, then it's a jungle walk. How does one make themselves open or keep themselves open for this kind of an being-centered experience?
Put your prices up. Honestly, the language that you're sharing with me, Ranjan, of how people have been engaging with conversations that they've had with you is indicative of a level of awakeness that they're not quite ready yet, right? Best advice for your first question is about leading by example, right? Telling people what to do, giving them unrequited help is the biggest waste of time, energy, and heartache you could possibly imagine. Family members, I've done this with my father and other people in my family who have been battling with all kinds of issues, right? Health and mental stuff. And so I just go towards the people that see the most amount of value in the value that I have to bring. People that invest in themselves to work with me are dropping a big chunk of change, right? And so when they pay it all up front too. So like when they come to me, it's an energetic thing. It's a vibrational thing. It's not a rational logic thing, right? No, there is no logic behind how I operate and how I charge for it, right? If you were to compare me to a psychologist, because the impact I have on people's lives is very holistic, all right? But they have to align with me energetically, and certain people are still asleep, right? You know, you hear about, you know, people waking up and, you know, being sheep and all this other stuff. It's a real thing. And there's only a certain small percentage of the population that resonates with me. There's people out there, former friends of mine, that think I'm a complete fraud. They think I'm a complete fraud. And they've told me. Now, they're not friends of mine anymore, by the way, because I'm very good at setting clear boundaries about being around people that are going to lift me up and empower me. How they come to that conclusion is a telegraphing of their own insecurities, right? Anytime anyone ever says anything super negative about you, it's because they're operating from their own fear and scarcity. Now, what people think of me, Ranjan, is none of my business, right? And people think about us way less than we even realize. But I think putting a premium on what it is that you do, I would put your prices up. I would put your coaching fees up immediately. And then by default, you'll have to start attracting people that are at that level. And people are more at that level are likely to be entrepreneurial, successful entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. You know, I got a friend of mine, her name's Susan Drum. She's in a mastermind group that I'm in called the Selfless Givers, right? She's got 3 billionaires that she coaches one-on-one. And you know what I said to her, Ranjan? Susan, what do billionaires have trouble with? Guess what? The same stuff that you and I do. It's just magnified at a much bigger level when you've got, you know, 11 figures or whatever $1 billion is, right? She's $100,000 for 6 months coaching, right? You know, what Steve charges, right? There's a reason why he does that. It'll eliminate a lot of the people that aren't at that level yet to fully appreciate his genius, you know? And I think with you as well, you've done all the work and you're continuing to do the work and evolve. Like, people need to pay a premium for that. And I really think you'll start attracting much higher caliber coaching clients. I'm not saying that they are bad people. They just ain't ready yet.
Superb, Laban. You know, I really appreciate it because, yes, it took me a while to understand that and accept that. Well, even, you know, the early days, I still remember the guilt that I had to even talk about what I charge for my coaching. And you know, as if people would come back, you know, why don't you do it for free? And why don't you help people? Why don't you charge fee? Why do you charge so much? And I would feel guilty to raise my you know, fee. It's very recently that I started doing, and I started on, you know, it was in a messaging with Steve Hardison that I understood that this is not about you, this is about them. Mm-hmm. And it's a yeah.
The more people pay, the more people pay attention. And like that's from Les Brown. People don't put any value on anything that's free, right? You know this. And so I want to charge, and this lady, this Susan Drum lady said to me, she got some great advice a few years ago. She said, as a coach, you should charge an amount so high that it makes you feel ill when you say it out loud. Right? And because when you receive the money from someone who is investing a big chunk of change in you, what it does for me is it's like, right, I am going to serve the heck out of this person. I want this person to walk away from our time together absolutely blown away and humbled, right? So then I go off and do more work on me.
Fantastic.
Do you know what I mean? Daniel Harner, who is in this Ultimate Coach group, he's known as Carl Jung 2.0. He was trained by David Hawkins, amazing guy. He said that coaching is paid therapy for us. It really is. It really is. But it allows us to create impact. And if Ranjan, if you shared one piece of knowledge that shaved 20 years off a learning curve from someone and allowed someone to be a more present father, a more present manager, that was the boss of a huge, big company, you're talking about impacting millions and millions of lives because of the butterfly effect. What dollar amount can you put on that, right?
Exactly.
You can't.
Yes.
So the dollar amount is inconsequential. It's just about limiting beliefs. You know, I'm going to continue to put my coaching prices up because I don't want to have too many coaching clients bouncing around at one time. I give so much of myself when I'm with these people that if I'm not careful, it will deplete me, right? Because you cannot give from an empty cup. So I've got to keep the time in there to replenish all my goodness, right?
Yes, Laban. I to share an experience, I gave a workshop on authentic influence just last week, and we had a limited number of participants, but after that, I saw the impact that it created. And then I have people from there calling me and then asking me for hiring me as their coach. And I can see that, in spite of making a mention of my fee, I had one participant go, I'm joining by this 25th. I'm paying you by this 25th. And then I have others of that level, when they say they're super scared and they like, oh my God. So probably now I understand. It's not about me. It's about them. And they are yet to be ready for that. And Laban, in all this journey of your personal reinvention, personal transformation, I would like you to talk about your love life. And
one of my favorite subjects.
Yes. And love, I see, for me, love is being a present father, as you said, being a present son, and love, maybe from your perspective, your experience with love, but I'm talking about the heart-centered living. So love in any form. So how's been your experience with love, finding love or creating love, and the love that you're experiencing now in this moment?
I don't know I've ever been asked this question before, Ranjan. So well done. Bravo to you. The magic for me really happened in my life when I finally loved me, when I finally fell in love with Laban Ditchburn. Then, and only then, Ranjan, was I able to be fully loved. And incidentally, only a few short months after having that breakthrough, I met the woman of my dreams walking down the main street in Melbourne, Australia. And I went up to this woman and I said, "Excuse me, but you are stunning. And I wondered if you'd ever drink with me one time." And we just got married about 5 weeks ago in Las Vegas. She's the woman that I knew I wanted to meet my whole life, Ranjan, but was beginning to think that I wouldn't. And I was 38 when I met her, right? So it's never too late. And for me, getting to a point where I could be loved, like our relationship, we've been together 4 years in September, gets better and better and better and better every day. We still have challenges like any couple, but we're able to operate from a place of absolute adoration for each other and respect. And she empowers me with her feminine energy and allows me to step right into my masculine. And from that point of view, from that love question that you've got, that has been one of the most transformative moments in my life. When you're talking about love from a friendship or family point of view, there's still areas in my life that I need work on. I still have family members that antagonize me and cause me quite a lot of heartache at times, like my father. And, my parents split up when I was 3.5. I didn't really have much to do with my father until I, went to go live with him when I was 14. And my father, despite his best efforts, was a very weak male. And what I mean by that, he allowed himself to be dominated by his former wives. And he imparted, I learned a lot from my father, lots of wonderful blessings, but I also inherited a lot of negative traits, a lot of stuff that I had to unlearn or de-learn that really negatively impacted my adulthood. And so, I am getting a lot better at forgiveness and setting people free and loving them unconditionally. I'm an empath. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram scale. My personality is that I really do care about people. And when I see family members especially that are doing things in their life that cause them great pain and that I know that I can help with, it has been very challenging at times to just step away and just to love them unconditionally. I'm getting a lot better at that. So they're the two main areas. I really feel like, my relationship with animals has improved as well. Like dogs and cats will come up to me and they will nuzzle up to me. And I know this might sound really crazy, but it's really fascinating that animals would respond better to me now that I love myself and I'm maybe putting out this energy. Well, I know I'm putting out energy that other humans and animals want to be around. It's really interesting.
Laban, we spoke about forgiveness. We spoke about self-love. Forgiveness, okay, we have been exploring, but when somebody talks about loving self and you having had this experience of falling in love with yourself, I would want you to spend at least 2 minutes giving us what exactly happened. And well, I know that you cannot dissect it, but still, what exactly is that falling in love with self, and how did you experience falling in love with yourself?
I've done so many bad things in my life that if I wrote them down and focused on them, I'd kill myself. And I would argue that most people that have lived a few years, particularly as an adult, would probably do the same thing. And it's not things that have been deliberately done. Some were, but most weren't. And what good is that if I go and kill myself because of what I've done? All right. We all do stupid things. We all do bad things. We all do things that we regret. Sometimes we do things that land us in prison or end up taking someone else's life or harming other people. And thankfully I haven't quite crossed that boundary yet. Now that I don't do drink or drugs or those things are way less likely to happen now. But I think that for me was a real catalyst. I just learned to accept who I was and realize that my flaws were really my superpower. Now that I've got this amazing ability to share my story with credibility, because anyone that's gone through what I've gone through and struggled with addiction and being in relationships where I would attack the religious and cultural views of the lady that I was with, my ex girlfriend who was from Zimbabwe. I did those things, but there's no point in holding myself to ransom for them. I've apologized where possible and I've moved on and I accept who I am now. And I'm really proud of the man that I've turned into, Ranjan. I'm still a deeply flawed human being, but I'm really proud of the man that I am now. And I'm doing the best I can with the tools I've got available. And thankfully, because of the work I do, I'm learning more and more tools.
Laban, this was a powerful conversation we had, and it's more than 60 minutes that we have been talking. And it's been a great value to have you on my show, Moments with Masters, and you truly are a master. And Laban, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your stories. There is half the story that I have to talk to Anna, and because I promised her that I want to have her on my show probably very soon. And the remaining half, the love story would be coming from Anna. So definitely I would love to have her on my show, and I would not let you talk about that. So probably, thank you so much, Laban. Thanks for great value that you added. And when I write my next book, I've written 4, and when I'm going to write my 5th book, probably I'm going to write about you and the way I learned about accepting myself and declaring myself as the world's best authentic influence coach. Then it's going to be a big story from Laban to Ranjan Kumar. And thank you so much, Laban. Thanks for being with me. Thanks for being with all of us from India. Love you. Love you so much, Laban. Namaste.
Love you too, brother.
Thank
See
you
you
so
soon.
much. See you
Bye.
soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.